that this recheck was done by the doctor for the Tennessee Titans, who is an internationally renowned specialist on hips. And that's a very important piece here as far as it relates to how teams will view that. Let's talk about that and why that's so important.
Yeah, I think it's crucial, Greeny. And here's the thing. This was the way this was constructed. It was basically asked by all these NFL teams. This is the way the combine rechecks go. Who would you like to check on Tua? And there's obviously some ramifications of that. And I'll get to that in a moment. But this is a guy in Thomas Byrd who is known as one of the best hip specialists in the entire world. And so he's somebody that is very trusted throughout the NFL. He's been on the physicians board for years in the NFL and is known, of course, obviously for these hip procedures. He's been very forward thinking in that as well. And he, when looking at the pictures that were given to him from the check that happened even a month ago, saw even more improvement from those, which I think is another key point here. And in fact, Greeny, Dan Orlovsky sent a tweet just a little while ago asking, hey, if the Tennessee Titans doctor can look at Tua, why can't the Dolphins doctor go and look at Tua? Well, here's the key reason. They're trying to limit travel. So Thomas Byrd just so happens to be based in Nashville, which is where Tua Tagovailoa is doing his training. That's why this worked out quite well for them to be able to not only get the doctor to check on Tua for this final check before the draft that the other NFL teams and NFL doctors wanted to be associated with this, but he also just so happens to be based right where Tua is at this current point, which limits the travel, which stays within the confines of what everybody's trying to do right now to limit this pandemic.
See, Laura is actually answering Dan Orlovsky's Twitter questions while we are doing this live. That's outstandingly well done. Meantime, I'm told Shefty has more to jump in here with. Shefty, what do you have?
Greeny, the encouraging part for Tua here in this entire process is he really does seem to be making a lot of progress and a lot of improvement. And everything that every team had hoped to see, even though it can't get its own hands on him at this point in time with its own doctors, has happened. You're seeing the videos, you're getting the positive reports, and basically this has become the best case scenario for Tua for whatever that's worth. That's as far as teams could take it right now. And again, it still will be something of a medical gamble because of the history he has with his hip, but his ankles are coming along. His hip is improving. He's really in as good a spot as he could be. And as Laura Rutledge said earlier this week, he does expect to be ready for the start of the season, whenever that is.
Right, exactly. So if you watch our show, you've been following Laura's reporting on this from the very beginning. I don't think it could have wound up in a better place, realistically, than it is right now where we are. And that brings us to our draft expert, Mel Kiper Jr. So knowing everything we know, Mel, where does this put Tua in your mind?
I think it puts him as either the second or third quarterback, and I'm going to keep him at 2 because obviously when you're in the league and you're making those decisions, obviously it's a huge gamble. Rex Ryan talked about that. Rex was very accurate in talking and not overstating it about what Tua is in terms of a risk. But it's a big reward. It's a quarterback, and you don't find quarterbacks like Tua out there every year available. And the only reason he's going to be there at 5 is because of the injury. So if you're Miami, you got to think that Herbert is just a better quarterback than Tua. Because the medical, to me, if you're Miami, you're just sitting at 5, Greeny, is, I wouldn't say it's secondary, but it gets down to how much better is Tua than Herbert. You think he's better than Herbert. If they're equal, you take Herbert because of the injury. But if they're not, then Miami at 5 would say, I'm only looking at Tua because of the injury. So that makes it a lot more palatable for the Dolphins just to take him at 5 if he falls to them without needing for them to trade up and give up some of those valuable draft picks, which in this draft will be hole fillers at other positions.
Well, if you were watching our show about 20 minutes ago, you saw Rex Ryan likes Justin Herbert. And again, he's the guy who loved Daniel Jones last year, and Jones became, that surprise. So give me a quick thumbnail on Herbert right now relative to Tua as far as prospects in your mind.
Herbert has gained a lot of momentum, Greeny, because of what he is as a physically gifted quarterback and a super intelligent, classy quarterback. Everybody loves Herbert. You think about the Senior Bowl week, I really believe Jim Nagy does a great job down there getting those players to Mobile. That really helped him because it showed how his teammates galvanize around him. That was a big question. Is he an introvert? Is he a leader? What about that? Well, guess what? That proved at the Senior Bowl and at the Combine, the way he seemed to be a guy was gaining momentum in that regard as well. And the way he finished the season, pro day, everything's kind of come together, I think, for him to be right there with Tua and make it a really tough decision for teams who are trying to weigh Tua with the injury or a clean Justin Herbert, who wasn't as good as a quarterback on the field at Oregon as Tua was at Alabama. But again, that big injury risk for Tua is why that's going to be a really interesting dynamic to see how that plays out come late April.
All right, Mel, outstanding. Thank you, my man. We'll see you next week. And let me bring Rex Ryan back into the conversation as well as Dan Orlovsky. And Rex, again, for those who are just joining us, have not heard your thoughts. As you sit here, you listen to everything. You heard Laura with the medicals. You heard what Shefty has on the inside. You heard Mel's evaluation. Right now, if you're in there making the decision, what do you do?
Well, I think first off, look, I mean, this is great news about Tua. I'm a fan of football. I hope this kid's healthy and has an amazing career. With that being said, I don't think if I only have one first-round pick, I don't know if I can risk it on Tua. And as much as I love him, you might take Herbert. Now, as a player, there's no comparison to these two. And I love Herbert, but Tua is so special as a player that, to me, I think he's the better player. However, with that being said, the injury thing, you can't ignore it. And the fact he's had 4 or 5 surgeries, I know we reported 4. My sources tell me 5 surgeries that this young man's had. And if you get hurt in college, you're going to get hurt in the NFL. So to me, I think if I'm one of those teams, if I have multiple picks, I think this makes great sense for Miami to take Tua. I don't think there's any question. But if you're one of these other teams, boy, I don't know. It's going to be so risky. I think it's the greatest risk in the history of the NFL draft.
I think that's a very defendable argument, the risk-reward level here, because if you hit, then if he's Drew Brees, which I've heard people make that comparison, then it's one of the great picks of all time. And if it goes the other way, we all know how badly that can turn out. So, Dan, I'll ask you, is the bigger risk taking him or passing on him?
Passing on him, because he's that special of a player. And if the organization, you've got to look at this as not just necessarily a right now moment, but also a futuristic thing. Like, if you pass on Tua and watch him, and I heard Dominique Foxworth say this yesterday, if you pass him and then pass on him and watch him become the player that many of us think he's going to be, you're likely going to be out of a job.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.